The fluorescent lights hummed softly in the empty corridors of Meridian Global Solutions as Grace Parker pushed her cleaning cart down the marble hallway. It was 6:47 a.m., and the building was still wrapped in morning silence. Grace had been working these halls for 3 years, invisible to most who passed by, just another face in the background of their busy corporate lives. But today would be different. Today, everything would change. Before we dive into this incredible story, I want you to do something for me. Take a second to comment below and let me know where you're watching from. And if this story moves you like it moved me, hit that subscribe button because I promise you'll want to hear more stories like this one. Now, let's get back to our story. Grace wasn't supposed to be cleaning the executive floor that morning. Her usual partner, Tom, had called in sick, leaving Grace to cover both the 3rd and 15th floors alone. As she wheeled her cart past the conference rooms, she noticed something unusual. Lights were on in the main boardroom, and voices carried through the slightly open door. Curious but respectful, Grace continued her work, emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces. That's when she heard it, a heated conversation in what sounded like Mandarin Chinese. 2 executives were arguing about a failed deal with a Beijing-based company, their voices growing more frustrated by the minute. "We're losing millions because of this miscommunication," one voice said in English. "Their translator completely botched the cultural nuances in our proposal." 3 months of work down the drain," replied the other. "If only we had someone who really understood the language and culture." Grace paused, her cloth frozen mid-wipe on a nearby table. She understood every word they had spoken in Mandarin. Not only understood it, she could have explained exactly where their original proposal had gone wrong. You see, Grace had a secret that no one in that gleaming corporate tower could have imagined. This quiet janitor, who smiled politely and went about her work without drawing attention, spoke 10 languages fluently. Mandarin and Cantonese from her childhood years spent traveling with missionary parents. Spanish from her teenage years in Mexico City. French from her university days in Montreal. Arabic from a year spent in Morocco. Portuguese from her travels through Brazil. German from online courses during quiet nights. Italian from a summer working in Rome. Japanese from anime that turned into serious language study. Korean from cultural immersion programs. And Hindi from her Indian neighbors who became like family. But how did a woman with such incredible linguistic abilities end up pushing a cleaning cart through corporate hallways? Life, as it often does, had taken unexpected turns. Grace had been a linguistics professor at a small college in Toronto until budget cuts eliminated her position. Personal setbacks followed, caring for her sick mother, mounting medical bills, and the crushing weight of starting over with credentials that weren't immediately recognized in her new city. When she applied for the janitorial position at Meridian Global Solutions, she didn't mention her background. She needed work, and she needed it fast. Besides, who would believe that their night shift cleaner held a PhD in applied linguistics? As Grace listened to the executive's frustration about their failed deal, something stirred inside her. She thought about her daughter, Lily, who looked up to her despite their current circumstances. She thought about all the time she'd wanted to speak up but held back, convinced that her voice didn't matter in this world of suits and corner offices. The conversation in the boardroom continued, with one executive making a phone call to cancel what would have been a partnership worth $23 million. Grace took a deep breath, knocked gently on the boardroom door, and stepped inside. "Excuse me, gentlemen," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation about the Beijing deal." The 2 executives, VP of International Relations Blake Thompson and CFO Sarah Mitchell, looked up in surprise. They recognized Grace as one of the cleaning staff but had never actually spoken to her. "I'm sorry, we're in a private meeting," Blake said, not unkindly but clearly dismissive. "I understand, sir," Grace replied. "But I believe I know why your deal failed. Your translator used Hazwa when they should have used Huaban when describing your partnership intentions. Hazwa implies a temporary business arrangement, while Huaban suggests a long-term, mutually beneficial relationship. In Chinese business culture, this distinction is crucial." The room fell completely silent. Sarah leaned forward. How do you know this? I speak Mandarin, ma'am, among other languages. And if I may be so bold, your proposal also missed several key cultural elements that would have demonstrated respect for their traditional business values. Blake and Sarah exchanged glances. This was either an elaborate prank or they had just discovered something extraordinary. What other languages do you speak? Blake asked slowly. Grace hesitated for a moment, then decided there was no turning back. Mandarin, Cantonese, Spanish, French, Arabic, Portuguese, German, Italian, Japanese, Korean, and Hindi. And I have my Ph.D. in Applied Linguistics from the University of Toronto. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah was the first to recover. Why are you working as a janitor? Grace smiled sadly. Because sometimes life doesn't go according to plan, and you do what you must to provide for your family. At that moment, CEO Nathan Brooks walked into the boardroom for what he thought would be an early morning briefing about the failed Beijing deal. Instead, he found his two top executives sitting across from a woman in a janitor's uniform, discussing international business strategy in fluent Mandarin. Blake, Sarah, Nathan said slowly, would someone like to explain what's happening here? Over the next 20 minutes, Grace found herself sharing her story, her academic background, her language skills, and how she'd ended up in her current position. She explained the cultural and linguistic errors in their Beijing proposal with such precision and depth that it became clear this wasn't just casual knowledge. Nathan Brooks had built his company from the ground up, and he'd learned to recognize talent in unexpected places. But this was extraordinary even by his standards. Grace, Nathan said finally, would you be willing to fix this deal? What happened next seemed like something out of a movie, but sometimes reality is more incredible than fiction. Within hours, Grace found herself in a conference room, no longer as the janitor but as an emergency consultant. She spent the day crafting a new proposal, one that not only corrected the linguistic errors but incorporated cultural elements that showed deep respect for Chinese business traditions. She suggested opening the proposal with a reference to the concept of guanxi, the importance of long-term relationships in Chinese business culture. She recommended including subtle references to shared values and mutual prosperity. Most importantly, she restructured the entire document to follow Chinese business communication patterns. By evening, the new proposal was ready. But Grace's day was far from over. Nathan Brooks called an emergency all-hands meeting. The entire company, from executives to entry-level employees, gathered in the main auditorium. Grace stood at the back, still in her janitor's uniform, watching as Nathan took the stage. Today, Nathan began, I learned something that reminded me why our company exists. We exist to connect people across cultures, to build bridges between different parts of our world. And sometimes, the person best equipped to build those bridges is standing right next to us, if only we take the time to really see them. He then told Grace's story to the entire company. The room was captivated as Nathan explained how their janitor had not only saved a $23 million deal, but had revealed a depth of knowledge and skill that could transform their international operations. Grace Parker, Nathan said, looking directly at her across the crowded auditorium, I'd like to offer you a position as our Director of International Cultural Relations, with a starting salary of $180,000 per year, full benefits, and equity in the company. The auditorium erupted in applause, but Grace felt like she was in a dream. People who had walked past her for 3 years without a second glance were now looking at her with respect and admiration. But Nathan wasn't finished. Furthermore, he continued, we're establishing the Grace Parker Scholarship Fund for displaced academics and working parents who need help getting back on their feet in their professional careers. Because if we almost missed someone this talented, how many others are we overlooking? The story didn't end there. The Beijing deal not only went through but expanded into a 5-year partnership worth over $100 million. Grace became the face of Meridian's Cultural Sensitivity Training Program, helping the company avoid costly misunderstandings in international markets. But perhaps more importantly, her story sparked a company-wide culture change. Nathan instituted Hidden Talents meetings where employees could share skills and backgrounds that weren't reflected in their job descriptions. They discovered an accountant who was a brilliant graphic designer, a security guard who spoke 6 languages, and a receptionist who had a master's degree in international relations. Grace's daughter Lily, who had watched her mother's quiet dignity through their difficult years, saw her receive a standing ovation at the annual company dinner. She later said it was the moment she decided to study linguistics herself, inspired by her mother's example of how knowledge and perseverance can overcome any obstacle. 6 months later, Grace stood in that same boardroom, now as an equal among equals, leading a presentation about expanding into Southeast Asian markets. She thought about the morning that changed everything, how a simple act of courage, of speaking up when it mattered, had transformed not just her life but the lives of everyone around her. The real magic wasn't in her language skills, impressive as they were. The real magic was in the recognition that every person has value, that talent exists in unexpected places, and that sometimes the most important thing a leader can do is simply pay attention to the people right in front of them. Nathan Brooks later reflected that Grace taught him the most valuable lesson of his career. We spend so much time looking for talent in all the obvious places that we forget to see the extraordinary in the ordinary. Today, Meridian Global Solutions is known not just for its international business success, but for its culture of recognizing and nurturing hidden talents. The story has been shared at business schools, leadership conferences, and corporate training sessions around the world. But perhaps the most powerful testament to its impact is this. The company now has a policy that every employee, regardless of their position, has an annual Hidden Talents interview where they can share skills, experiences, and dreams that might not be reflected in their current role. Grace Parker proved that genius doesn't always wear a suit, that wisdom doesn't always come with a title, and that sometimes the person who can change your entire world is the one you've been walking past every day without really seeing. Her story reminds us all to look closer, listen more carefully, and never underestimate the power of giving someone a chance to show who they really are. This story moved me deeply because it reminds us that extraordinary people are all around us. We just need to have the eyes to see them and the courage to give them opportunities. If this story inspired you, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And I want to know, have you ever discovered hidden talents in someone unexpected? Share your story in the comments below. Remember, we all have the power to be like Nathan Brooks, to really see the people around us and to create opportunities for others to shine. Sometimes, all it takes is paying attention and having the courage to say, "Tell me more." Until next time, keep looking for the extraordinary in the ordinary. You never know whose life you might change, including your own.